Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Last week, in response to reports of ICE agents operating to arrest undocumented Bronxites in partnership with the New York Immigration Coalition, the Bronx Borough President put together a virtual Know Your Rights immigration training for our diverse borough of the Bronx. Tonight we'll continue the Know Your Rights dialogue and try to provide some useful information to our largely immigrant population of almost 1.5 million in the Bronx. Please join me in welcoming the Deputy Bronx Borough President, the Honorable Janet Peguero. Nice to see you, Madam Deputy.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you for joining us. And coming to us virtually, the Policy Director for the Bronx Defenders Immigration Practice. It is Rosa Cohen-Cruz. We will have, there she is. Hi, Rosa, nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Deputy, let's just start with you. What were the concerns of the office of Borough President Vanessa Gibson when reports surfaced that ICE agents were operating potentially to arrest undocumented people in the Bronx?
You know, Gary, first and foremost, I want to thank you and I want to thank BronxTalk for encouraging this conversation and having this conversation, not just in dialogue, but also empowering our viewers with the information that's necessary. I will be remiss if I didn't state that as an immigrant myself, born in the Dominican Republic, I came to this country at the age of 6, that this felt very personal. It felt personal for me, it felt personal for my community, it felt personal for my family. And we knew immediately that when the Bronx is attacked in such a way, that our role and duty at Borough Hall is to empower our residents, to empower our immigrant community, to ensure that they have the necessary information, education, tools, and resources to make an informed decision.
Well, certainly at BronxNet Television, we believe that knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
It is, after all, what we do. Just talk about, let's just go a little further on the personal nature of it. So that means when you look at families who might be affected in this case, you have a real emotional connection to it. And so that makes it a little more imperative than just, frankly, another issue that you feel strongly about.
Absolutely. You know, growing up in the city of New York, you grow up knowing that you live in a sanctuary city. You grow up knowing that you, as an immigrant, you are empowered. As an immigrant, you are supported. And as an immigrant, you have an opportunity to thrive in the city of New York. And so when you are when you feel threatened, when you feel scared by these ICE raids, that level of comfortability and community kind of leaves your soul. And so for me, it was turning to my family. One, as an appointed official and someone in government, folks are immediately, within my family circle, within my community, are going to turn to me and say, Janet, what do I do? And to be on...
And they did do that.
And absolutely did that, absolutely. Yeah. Phone calls, text messages, outcry. Right before January, I was in the Dominican Republic with my family, and we were just watching the news, and I felt the anxiety kind of flush through. And so to receive those calls, to know that I am serving a community that's anxious, for me, it really hit home. It's a scary time. Again, as an immigrant New Yorker, I think about 6-year-old Janet as an immigrant, a newly arrived American here, a newly arrived islander, coming to this country and feeling safe. What do I tell 6-year-old Janet if she were living in this time?
We're going to make some of those recommendations in a bit. I just found this fact that while I was doing research for this program, that the U.S. Census, so these are the official numbers, considers the Bronx to be the most diverse area in the country.
Right.
And this was just kind of a fun fact. There's a 90% chance, according to the numbers, that any 2 residents chosen, I guess you know this, chosen, I never heard this before, chosen at random in the Bronx would be of different race or ethnicity. We can look at these 2, and we are, for example. And so one of the things that I learned from talking to the Borough President's office is this belief that, number one, we need to celebrate our immigrant populations, and that there is power in numbers. And because of the numbers I just quoted, that there should be some strength here.
Absolutely. And let me be clear, the immigrant community is the lifeline of the city of New York. The city of New York was founded on immigration. And so, again, growing up in the city, knowing that I live in a sanctuary city, and the feeling that that notion is immediately disappearing overnight is
very
scary.
difficult.
It's very difficult.
I hadn't thought that I was going to mention this, but this goes back way many years to the early 1900s. I had a cousin who came through the Canadian border, and he kind of latched onto a family, and they let him hold their duck. And he always remembered walking across customs with a duck. And now, of course, you look at the family, and we all grew up here. So it's a similar experience a century ago, even more than a century ago, probably.
Absolutely.
Let's bring on our other guest, the policy director for the Bronx Defenders Immigration Practice, and that is Ms. Cohen Cruz. Nice to have you with us. Just talk to me a little bit about what the Bronx Defenders Immigration Practice in general recommends. We will go through a lot of things, but what are the kinds of things that you, in your interaction with Bronx people, think that they ought to have in their head as they approach this very different period of time?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show and for that question. I think the first thing I should say is anything I say on the show, of course, is not going to be legal advice, because everyone's situations are so different, and immigration law in particular is really individualized. So really the top advice is, try to get a consult with an attorney if you are concerned about your status, if you're concerned about the possibility that you could be targeted for enforcement from ICE. And particularly folks who have had contact with some of the other systems, the criminal legal system, the family policing system, it's always important just to check in and try to find out if that prior contact might put you at a heightened risk of destabilizing your status. So that's kind of first and foremost. If there's any concern, get that individualized advice from an attorney if you can.
That makes total sense, and we're going to provide some advice from the New York Immigration Coalition, and I think we can all appreciate that. In general, we'd like to think the wide majority, and I think they are not criminals and have never been involved in criminal activity. Should you be concerned now? Because I'll give you an example. I mean, I'd heard a story that ICE agents, raided a Home Depot, for example, all the people working there. And there were some who were, maybe didn't have their documentation, et cetera, and they were never, and maybe they were undocumented, but never involved in criminal activity. Is there concern for those people, just for example? And again, we realize it's not legal advice for any individual. That's fair.
I'll just say that, there's not a clear prioritization among the Trump administration. And so I think it is important for everybody to make a plan. Anybody who, might be at risk of deportation, to make a plan and to think through what they would do if they or their loved ones or a family member is picked up by ICE or detained or deported. Make plans for your family, make plans for children. That is important. But we also don't want to create a culture of panic. There are a lot of unverified reports flying around. And so I think it is important to be prepared, but also we need to be able to live our lives engage in civil society.
We're going to provide very specific information in a moment right after this question. This is just a novice question. If they were to go into a store or some other business or some other location, do they have advanced knowledge of who they think is working there, and how did they get that knowledge? In other words, just for example, if somebody came into the country as a migrant through the last process and happily found, maybe even housing and also found employment, does somebody know that? Or are they just saying, well, we'll make this horrible stereotype about the people who work in a place and say there must be some people here? Do you have a sense of what that process is? Seems to be like this cloud that's out there.
Yeah, I can say we are certainly concerned about that kind of profiling that you just mentioned. And that's one of the things that, is so harmful about what this administration is doing is that they're really encouraging that kind of profiling of communities. But I'll also say that ICE has access to information from all types, different sources. And so sometimes they may have direct,
anything is
and
possible, I
other
guess.
times they
Yeah.
may be profiling. Yeah.
So let's get right to it, Deputy. If you're ready, we'll take a look at some of the materials that were presented at the forum that they had just the other day. It was actually last week by the time this eventually airs. But let's just take a look at some of the things. So this was the Know Your Rights training presented by the New York Immigration Coalition. And let's just take a look at some of the points they made. So you have rights. Every person in the United States, regardless of immigration status, has basic rights. You always have the right to remain silent and not answer questions. You can refuse searches of your body, your home, and your belongings. You cannot be arrested or detained for no reason. So that, I don't know if Ms. Cohen-Cruz, if you had a comment on it, and then Madam Deputy, if you had a comment on it.
Yeah, I think that's a great overview, a good reminder that we do have rights. This is a moment where there's a lot of fear. I think that's intentional, and we can always go back to everybody, regardless of their immigration status, has guaranteed rights by the Constitution, and I think that's really. I'm glad that this slide sort of leads with that, reminding folks that you absolutely do have rights, and their materials are about then diving into
that's fair. I was again thinking about you and your family and friends. If they see something like that, does that at least get them to say, okay, you know what I mean? This is a good place to start.
Yeah, and one of the things that the borough president did, and I know other elected officials are alike, is that we're hosting these educational forums virtually so that folks feel, again, empowered and feel safe at the same time. I think that there's so much information overload that sometimes going out there and receiving that information can also feel somewhat unsafe. And so having that virtual option, I also saw another elected official host a similar forum at a religious institution at our local churches. So I just want to really just think that regardless of party lines, regardless of district lines, that elected officials are coming together.
This is a borough-wide. It might be even larger than that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at some more. We have a lot to get through. A judicial warrant is issued by a court and signed by a judge. A judicial warrant does give law enforcement permission to enter private areas such as your home or conduct searches. Read the warrant carefully to make sure that it is valid. Let's just go to the next one from there. Now, if you're interacting it with ICE at home, I thought these were very, very useful. Do not open the door. Do not say anything if they are at your home. Ask to see identification and a warrant. If they do not, this is very important. If they do not have a judicial warrant, you can ask them to leave. If they are inside your home, if they did not have a judicial warrant, tell them that you did not consent and do not consent to entry or search. Tell them if there are children or other vulnerable residents in your home, so nobody gets injured and everybody is taken care of appropriately. And this, of course, with an underline, do not physically resist or interfere with them. Ms. Cohen-Cruz, you like these ideas here?
Yeah, this is an important slide. I don't know if you also have the slide of the administrative warrant, but ICE will often present their own paper that kind of looks like a warrant, but it'll be signed by an ICE officer, a deportation officer, not signed by a judge. And so you can ask for them to slide the warrant that they have, slide whatever paper they have under the door, or hold it up to a peephole, or take a picture and send it. So that way you have verification that it's a judicial warrant and not their own signed administrative warrant. And if folks are curious about what that administrative warrant is, a lot of these slides are available. There are quite a few PowerPoints like this that are now available online, and many of them have sample administrative warrants on them. So I do recommend taking a couple minutes and looking at the difference between the two pieces of paper.
Thank you very much. Let's keep going. I want to make sure we get a bunch of them in there. Are you a U.S. citizen? If you answer no, if you have valid immigration documents and you're over the age of 18, the law says you have to carry them with you. Please remember to do that. You will need to be able to show them or prove that you have valid status. Never provide false documents to immigration officials. And so let's keep going. I don't want to answer the question. You always have the right to not answer the question, and that is much preferred rather than giving false information, regardless of your immigration status. An agent may ask you more questions if you don't answer. You can keep repeating, I don't want to answer the question. You can ask, am I free to go? In other words, if I haven't answered, do you still need me? Just your thoughts about what you've just seen there.
Again, I think this is the information that's going to empower our immigrant community, to the attorney's point, to make a plan, to study these judgment warrants, to understand the differences between, typically with any type of legal documentation, it's used to kind of instill fear in our community. And so understanding the difference between the two and understanding your rights will go a long way.
Let's ask Ms. Cohen-Cruz, even though city and state laws prevent New York City police from getting involved, the police department is part of Homeland Security and their investigations task force. And there has been a question the last time there was an operation in the Bronx, NYPD was involved. What's your sense about the role of NYPD in this and where they are at? Are we going to see police officers partnering or even providing information, or are they really ultimately going to back off?
Yeah, I mean, the law, broadly speaking, prohibits NYPD and other city agencies, including ACS and the Department of Corrections, from sharing information with ICE in most cases. I think that is a really important separation, that actually there have been studies that have shown that sanctuary laws, so to speak, like that actually keep communities safer. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, you don't want your neighbor to be afraid to call 911 if your house is on fire. You don't want somebody to be afraid to call emergency services if they see a medical emergency. So it's really about trust and showing immigrant communities that they can engage with state and local actors, in this case, city actors, and not have to be afraid that actor may share information with ICE. Unfortunately, we've seen violations of the law, not just since Trump has taken office, but even, back in 2017, we saw the Department of Corrections illegally sharing information with ICE in emails using a hashtag Team Send Them Back, like very much anti-immigrant, very much in this sort of collusion mentality. And that kind of collaboration also disrupts due process. ICE often isn't going to collaborate with people to make sure people are returning to court and people are able to engage in the normal due process that everyday citizens are afforded. So,
let me just interject. You had told me, just talking about New York City and how it operates, you had told me that experiences in Chicago, which apparently was one of the first big cities that the federal government looked at, you said that experience taught you something about how you and other legal professionals will be dealing with this. Could you just review that? I think that's useful information for people.
Yeah, I had mentioned that in Chicago, they had been very effective in doing the Know Your Rights trainings. They also have, clear guidance in their sanctuary laws that show clear separation. And so there's two good lessons to take from that. One is Know Your Rights trainings are effective. Yes. People, when they learn their rights, do a good job of upholding the rights that they have. And second, places that are really separating out what the city is doing versus what the federal government is doing, and really disentangling the systems, are seeing more trust within their communities. They're seeing people feel that they can engage more safely in schools, with police, with local officials across the board, and that helps everybody, citizen and non-citizen alike.
Deputy Peguero, I want to just pursue this idea of panic and what's in people's minds. I'm a big believer. People who watch the show know that I'm a big believer in that state of mind of a populace is a very important concept.
Correct.
People are afraid. Just for example, attendance numbers in New York City schools are down compared to the same time last year. Now, the mayor said that it was a matter of weather and a number of other factors. Do you get the sense that people are actually holding back from going out? They're keeping their children from going to school and those kinds of things, or we haven't had that level of panic, so to speak?
Absolutely. I think I think we live it. I think we're seeing it. Gary, if you look at just walking in our communities, from street vendors to, again, even the traffic during dismissal has, in my experience, subsidized quite a bit. And so I think that goes back to Rosa's point that we need to empower folks. We need to ensure that folks are educated so that civic engagement can continue to thrive. I will bring it back to what I said earlier. Growing up, I felt that I lived in a sanctuary city. Right now, it does not feel like it. And so we're calling on the city to do a better job at empowering us in that
I'm
way.
glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask about that. There's a whole thing about, and it came out of the president, if you're called a sanctuary city, we won't support you. Is it okay to say out loud? Are you ready to say out loud that New York City wants to be and still should be a sanctuary city?
I absolutely believe in the core values of a sanctuary city. Again, the basis of the foundation of the city of New York has been fueled by immigrant communities. You said the numbers about the borough of the Bronx and who we are as a borough, what we identify as our diversity. And so we must stand beside our immigrant community, continue to empower them, and do what we can to ensure their safety.
I want to do something a little bit unfair. I found this, it's not verified, so to speak, but it was on one of the social media posts. It was a handwritten note from a girl in school. And if you see what it says, if ICE takes me, don't forget about me. I will be in El Salvador. You're my best friend, the brother I never had. It makes me cry when I look at it. I cry every night thinking that they will come for me at school. And
how old is the student?
We don't know. I just saw it. Somebody had shared it.
Right.
But I did it just to, and the verification of it I don't have. But I just wanted to make the point, because that level of fear is out there.
Gary, and thank you for humanizing it, right?
Well, that's what we are talking about, human beings after all.
Thank you for humanizing it, because I think that the immigration conversation has been over politicized, right? It's a red and blue issue, and regardless of which side you're on, the humanization is very real. As I mentioned earlier on, I think about 6-year-old Janet and how she will be navigating this new normal in this moment.
And when you were 8 years old, if this happened and you were in school, it's hard to say how you might have felt in your family. There's Cohen Cruz, which brings up another legal point, and maybe there's no answer to this. Can schools and churches and other religious institutions have been sanctuaries for people, and they have certainly housed undocumented, etc. Is that still in play? Are they still safe havens, so to speak? Is it complicated, or is there a yes or no answer to that?
I can say that, schools and churches have rights as well when it comes to, when an ICE agent comes to the door. And I've seen really good guidance out there for schools and churches. And I've seen, many houses of worship posting signage on their doors, making it clear, that in order to let let an ICE officer into a private space, they're going to want to see that judicial warrant, things like that. At the same time, there's no harboring is not allowed. So people need to make sure that they're complying with the law, and that they're not overstepping what the law is. And I think that if there's any questions, there's also really good guidance about calling those general counsels in the moment, calling higher ups officials before sort of taking that next step and letting somebody in, you can seek really specific guidance about what is allowed in that
You gave me some information. The New York Immigrants Family Unity Project is very helpful. People can look that up. And also you said not only Bronx Defenders, the Brooklyn Defenders, and the Legal Aid Society are good places to turn. Carry documents with you just in case. Deputy Peguero, final words before to our immigrant community, which is all of us in the Bronx. What are the final words that you want to
Gary, I think you said it quite perfectly. We are the immigrant community. The Bronx is an immigrant borough. And, you know, Bronx Borough Whole is committed to educating, empowering, and ensuring that our immigrant communities have the resources that they need in order to continue to thrive. And as Rosa mentioned, to continue to be civically engaged. I do want to mention one final thought. I want to thank our houses of worship. I've been around different churches, and they are doing an amazing, incredible job at lawyering up and educating their congregation. And so kudos to folks that go beyond government to support our immigrant community.
I think what it does is it stirs up kind of, why am I really doing this? Right. And I'm doing it to care for people. So Ms. Cohen-Cruz, final words on this program for you. I know you, as soon as we finish this, you're going to be back at work, and I'm sure there's people banging down your door. But what are you going to tell them, and what should we tell the people of the Bronx?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you or a loved one is detained, the most important thing to try to do is get in touch with a lawyer. The New York Immigrant Family Unity Project was mentioned. This is a critical program that actually provides a free attorney for folks who are eligible, who are in detention fighting their case. So look up the Legal Aid, Brooklyn Defender Services, and us at the Bronx Defenders are the three providers of that program. If you or a loved one is detained, make sure you reach out to one of those organizations to see if you can get that free legal representation, because that can make a very big difference.
Very large difference. Thank you so much, Deputy Bronx Borough President, the Honorable Janet Peguero. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And the Policy Director for the Bronx Defenders Immigration Practice, Rosa Cohen-Cruz. We appreciate your time with us, and we have all, I think, provided some important information. We thank everybody. We thank our producer is Rebecca Hemick, our director is Will Guzman, Urelis Encarnacion is on graphics, Ray Reyes on audio today. The editor, of course, is Diaz. We have a cast of thousands who work with us here in the studio. And to you too, most important, the people of the Bronx. So, the curtain don't fall and the creek don't rise. We'll be back next week. Good night.